Like I was saying, Winston Churchill is using fireside chats to rally the British people and defend their island against the Germans. In God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to their rescue and the liberation of the world. He's directing a lot of his message towards the United States and like, hey guys, we need your help. You need to get in the game. I love Churchill. I think he's eloquent, brilliant, funny. You got to check out his quotes when you have a chance. So we have the isolationists. Big debate in 1940: isolationists or internationalists or interventionists. All right, so on one side, the isolationists, there's a new committee called the American First Committee, very similar to what Trump's idea during the 2016 election. It's led by Charles Lindbergh, and that intervention is detrimental to American interests. So we want to stay isolated. Let's protect our borders. Who cares about everybody else? Internationalists, FDR, the best way to keep U.S. out of the war is to help allies fight the Germans. So again, if we can fight and defeat the Germans, there'd be less chance for them to attack American soil or interest. And there are some political cartoons. You probably can tell from the architecture here, this was done by Dr. Seuss. Sorry about that. It's right down there. And then again, fight against foreign war has begun, America first. So interventionists, and we have isolationists. Relax, Sam. I assure you the express train turns off here. So the Nazis are coming strong, but it's not going to come to America. It's going to veer off. Yeah, okay. Hitler wanted everybody destroyed in his path. FDR aids the Allies. Summer 1940, FDR asked Congress to allow trade of 50 destroyers in exchange for 99-year leases for bases in the Atlantic. So we give 50 destroyers to England. England gives us lots of land where we are going to use them for naval bases that we still own today. Even though we don't want to go to war, 73% support aid to Britain. Lend-Lease Act, 1941. This is a program to offer aid to the Brits in the fireside. I'll talk about that in a second. They're going to lend, lease, or otherwise dispose of any items not vital to the nation's defense. So we would either lend a destroyer, a battleship, an airplane, a tank, or whatever else, or we would lease it for like $1 a year. For like 100 years. So we're pretty much giving free stuff out to the British and also later to the Russians to help fight against them. And FDR makes the argument that this is okay because if somebody's house is on fire, would you not give your hose to that person, lend your hose to them so the fire doesn't spread to your house? So he's pretty much making the argument, we're going to lend all these weapons to help British defeat the Germans so our house doesn't go on fire next. With this, U.S. becomes the arsenal of democracy, and it also ends the Great Depression. The New Deal, even though it had some fantastic ideas, does not end the Great Depression. World War II does. The four freedoms. He makes a speech, FDR, talking about the four freedoms that are holy. And he's pretty much attacking the Italians, the Japanese, and the Italians, Germans, and Japanese with this speech. The freedom of speech and expression. Freedom of every person to worship God in his own way. Talking about the Holocaust. Freedom of speech and expression. Going against fascism. Freedom from want. This idea that people shouldn't go hungry, that they should have resources. And last but not least, freedom from fear. Again, talking about these fascists who would throw any dissidents in jail or put them in Holocaust camps, what have you. Norman Rockwell, a famous artist from that time period, depicted the four freedoms. This is the freedom of speech, an ordinary man speaking up in a council. The freedom of want. This is a famous image that you've probably seen Modern Family do, all right, that you should be able to eat and survive. Freedom of fear. You can't see his newspaper, but talks about bombings going on, and these boys should not be fearful of their lives or being bombed by the German Luftwaffe. And this is the freedom of faith, right? Freedom of religion. These are the four freedoms that should be extended to all people around the world, not just the United States. The Atlantic Charter, meeting between FDR and Churchill, they'd come up with 8 points, very similar to Winston Churchill's 14 points. There they are meeting, and you can see FDR is being held up by his son. And there's the two men. Look at Winston Churchill rocking the hat to the side. And again, this is trying to end war forever, just like Woodrow Wilson tried to do. Election in 1940, he goes for a third term, which is kind of anti-American, but he does it because the war is so important and he's nervous that nobody else could handle this situation. After he wins the war, he starts a draft. The first time we have a peacetime draft going on, and we start building up weapons because it looks like we're going to be going to war. And as you can tell, he dominates. Why Pearl Harbor? So 1940, the U.S. slaps trade sanctions on Japan for their aggressive behavior in the East. We do have a lot of territory in the East. Again, we have Guam, the Philippines. We had a lot of trade with China. We have Hawaii. So we're a little nervous about our territorial gains out there. 1941, the U.S. freezes Japanese assets in the American banks, and they also cut off all oil supplies. We were the biggest oil supplier to Japan during that time period. We did this in retaliation for them attacking French Indochina, which is today Vietnam. Japanese make a gamble. They think that, one, we are so fixated on Europe with Germany that they can possibly destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet and the oil reserves that we have in Hawaii. And by the time we rebuild everything, they would have fortified all these Asian islands, not just the ones that they have, but the Philippines, Guam, and everything else. So they attack Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, killing 2,400 Americans. The next day, December 8th, FDR makes a speech saying that this date will live in infamy and we have to declare war. So you think we would focus all our energies on Japan, but instead we decided we are going to focus our military resources and people and personnel on Europe. Europe first is going to be our calling card. Wartime conferences, you could take a look. These are all the conferences that the United States had with other European leaders outlining the war. Some pictures of FDR with Churchill, and then also FDR with Churchill and Stalin, the leader of the USSR, who becomes allies when Germany decides to attack the USSR. FDR dies on April 12, 1945. His president takes over, his third vice president, Harry Truman. And he's going to make the decision to drop the atomic bomb. And that is it. Hopefully you enjoyed. Have a great day. Bye-bye.